At the family vacation, we had a swimming pool session booked, and as everyone made their way to the pool, my 6-year-old daughter was scared to enter the water. Then my niece shouted, "I'll help you, come quickly." Out of excitement, she got changed, and as soon as she entered, my niece started to push her head deep, making it difficult for her to breathe. As I confronted my sister, "Tell your daughter to stop this nonsense, it's not funny." My sister laughingly said, "This will make your daughter confident." Then she went ahead and pushed her head down and she fell unconscious. Everyone started giggling and complimented her. Out of anger, I grabbed my daughter, and my husband came in and looked at our daughter, and that's when he lost it. My name is Lila, and I'm married to Neil. We have a beautiful 6-year-old daughter named Hannah who means everything to us. Hannah has always been cautious around water, not exactly afraid, but definitely hesitant. We've been working with her slowly, taking swimming lessons at our local community center, and she was making good progress. That's important context for what happened next. Every summer, my extended family rents a large vacation house in the mountains. It's become a tradition that everyone looks forward to: my parents, my sister Yvonne and her husband Brent, their 10-year-old daughter Tessa, my brother Craig with his wife Gail, and their twin 8-year-old boys Finn and Reed. This year, we'd splurged on a place with a beautiful swimming pool, thinking it would be perfect for the kids. The house was gorgeous when we arrived on Saturday morning. 3 stories, massive deck, and that stunning pool that looked like something out of a resort. Hannah was excited but nervous when she saw it. She kept asking if the water was deep and if she'd have to go in the deep end. I assured her she could stay in the shallow end in that baddie, and I would be right there with her. We'd booked a family pool session for Sunday afternoon, basically just our group having the pool to ourselves for 3 hours. Everyone was excited, and the adults had been talking about pool games and maybe teaching the kids some new swimming techniques. Sunday came, and after lunch, everyone started changing into their swimwear. Hannah had picked out her favorite pink and purple swimsuit with little unicorns on it. She was excited but kept asking me to promise I'd stay close to her in the water. I promised her at least 10 times that I wouldn't leave her side. As we all made our way down to the pool area, I could see Hannah's nervous excitement. The other kids were already running around, splashing their feet in the shallow end. Neil was setting up our chairs and towels while I helped Hannah with her water wings. Yes, she still used them, and there's nothing wrong with that for a 6-year-old who's building confidence. That's when my niece Tessa came over. Now, I need to be clear about Tessa. She's always been what my sister Yvonne calls spirited. What I call a bit of a bully. Yvonne has always made excuses for Tessa's behavior, claiming she's just confident and naturally leadership-oriented. But I've watched Tessa push around younger kids before, always under the guise of helping them. "Hannah, don't be such a baby about the pool," Tessa said, which immediately made me bristle. Before I could say anything, Tessa's tone shifted to what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. "I'll help you, come quickly. I know all the best spots to start swimming." Hannah looked up at me with those big brown eyes, and I could see she was torn between her natural caution and her desire to be brave like her older cousin. "Mommy, can Tessa help me?" I hesitated. Something about Tessa's sudden helpfulness felt off, but Hannah seemed genuinely excited for the first time since we'd arrived. "Okay, but stay in the shallow end, and I'm coming in right behind you." Hannah practically bounced with excitement as she finished getting ready. She trusted Tessa, and despite my reservations, I wanted to encourage Hannah's bravery. This was supposed to be about building her confidence in the water. Hannah entered the pool carefully, using the steps, staying in the shallow end where the water came up to her chest. I was literally 5 feet away, just about to step in myself, when everything went wrong. Tessa moved behind Hannah and, without warning, placed both hands on Hannah's shoulders. "Let me show you how to hold your breath underwater," she announced loudly. Before I could react, before Hannah could protest, Tessa pushed down hard on Hannah's shoulders, forcing her head completely underwater. Hannah's arms flailed immediately. She wasn't prepared, hadn't taken a breath, and was clearly panicking. "Tessa, stop that right now," I shouted, rushing into the water. But Tessa didn't stop. She kept pushing, and I could see Hannah struggling desperately underneath the water. I was moving as fast as I could, but the water was slowing me down, and those few seconds felt like hours. Hannah's movements were becoming more frantic, more desperate. She was drowning. My 6-year-old daughter was drowning, and her 10-year-old cousin was the one doing it to her. "Tessa! Stop!" I screamed at the top of my lungs. That's when Yvonne, my sister, looked over from where she was lounging in a chair. Instead of rushing to help, instead of telling her daughter to stop, she actually laughed. She laughed at my daughter being held underwater against her will. "Tell your daughter to stop this nonsense, it's not funny," I yelled at Yvonne as I finally reached Hannah and Tessa. Yvonne stood up, still smiling, still treating this like it was some kind of game. "Relax, Lila. This will make your daughter confident. She needs to learn not to be such a scaredy cat." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I pushed Tessa away from Hannah and pulled my daughter up out of the water. Hannah was coughing, sputtering, crying, and clearly traumatized. Her face was red, and she was gasping for air between sobs. But Yvonne wasn't done. As I held Hannah, trying to comfort her, Yvonne actually came over and grabbed Hannah from me, forcing her head back underwater. "See, Hannah? It's not scary." Hannah had already been oxygen deprived from the first incident, and this second forced submersion was too much for her small body. She stopped struggling after a few seconds underwater, her body going completely limp. When Yvonne finally let go, Hannah's unconscious body began to sink toward the bottom of the pool. I immediately dove down and pulled her lifeless form to the surface. I grabbed Hannah's unconscious body from the pool, and the terror of that moment still haunts me. She wasn't breathing regularly, her lips had a bluish tint, and she was completely unresponsive. I immediately started rescue breathing while Neil called 911. And here's the part that still makes my blood boil: everyone else started giggling. My parents, Brent, Craig, Gail, they were all laughing and actually complimenting Yvonne on her tough love approach. Someone said, "That's one way to teach her to swim." Another person said, "She'll be braver next time." I was holding my unconscious 6-year-old daughter, and my family was treating it like entertainment. I grabbed Hannah and started carrying her out of the pool area, when Neil came rushing over. He'd been inside getting more towels when it happened, but one look at Hannah's limp form and his face went completely white. "What happened?" he demanded. "Your daughter is fine," Yvonne called out dismissively. "She just needs to toughen up." Neil looked from Hannah to me to Yvonne, and I watched something change in his eyes. Neil is normally the calmest, most measured person I know. He's a high school teacher, great with kids, never raises his voice. But when he understood what had happened, he completely lost it. "You held my daughter underwater until she passed out?" His voice was deadly quiet. "It was just playing," Yvonne said, but she was starting to look less confident. "Playing?" Neil's voice exploded across the pool area. "She's unconscious. You nearly killed her." Neil immediately started checking Hannah's pulse, her breathing, everything he knew from his first aid training. Hannah was breathing but still unconscious. "We're taking her to the hospital. Now." "You're overreacting," my mother said. "She's fine. Look, she's breathing." "She's unconscious because her oxygen was cut off," Neil said through gritted teeth. "Do you understand that? She could have brain damage. She could have died." The drive to the nearest emergency room was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Hannah woke up during the drive, confused and scared, asking why her throat hurt and why she felt so dizzy. Neil called ahead to the hospital while I held Hannah in the back seat, and they were ready for us when we arrived. The emergency room doctor was thorough. They checked Hannah's oxygen levels, did neurological tests, and monitored her for signs of secondary drowning. She had to be observed for 24 hours to ensure there were no delayed complications from the near-drowning incident. Dr. Murphy, the attending physician, was very clear about what had occurred. "Your daughter experienced a near-drowning incident with loss of consciousness. When we lose consciousness from oxygen deprivation, there's always concern about brain injury. We need to monitor her closely, and she'll need to stay overnight for observation." When Drive Murphy asked how it happened, and I explained, her expression became very serious. This wasn't an accident. Someone deliberately held her underwater until she lost consciousness. You need to understand that this could have been fatal. The doctor's words hit me like a truck. We could have lost Hannah. Forever. Because of my sister's twisted idea of helping and my family's complete lack of concern for Hannah's safety. The hospital reported the incident to Child Protective Services, as they're required to do in cases involving potential child endangerment. A social worker came to talk with us and with Hannah. Hannah, brave little girl that she is, clearly described what happened. Tessa pushed me under the water and wouldn't let me up. I couldn't breathe. It was scary. Meanwhile, back at the vacation house, my family was apparently continuing their pool day as if nothing had happened. Neil's sister called us to check in. She wasn't at the vacation, and when Neil told her what happened, she was horrified. "Are you serious? They just continued swimming after Hannah passed out?" That's when we realized the true scope of how wrong this situation was. A normal family would have been devastated, apologetic, and deeply concerned. Our family was having a pool party. Neil and I made some decisions during those 6 hours at the hospital. First, we were never putting Hannah in a situation where she could be harmed by these people again. Second, there were going to be consequences for what happened. Real consequences. Hannah was cleared to leave the hospital the following evening, after a full 24-hour observation period. We were instructed to watch for delayed symptoms of drowning and to return immediately if she showed any concerning signs. We drove straight to a hotel instead of returning to the vacation house. My phone started ringing around 9 p.m. First Yvonne, then my parents, then Craig. All wanting to know where we were, all acting like we were being dramatic. "Lila, you're really making a big deal out of nothing," Yvonne said when I finally answered. "Tessa feels bad that Hannah couldn't handle a little fun." "Hannah lost consciousness, Yvonne. She nearly drowned." "But she didn't drown. She's fine now, right? Kids are resilient." I hung up on her. The next morning, while Hannah slept in at the hotel, Neil and I made some calls. First, we called a lawyer. In our state, what happened to Hannah could potentially be charged as assault on a minor, child endangerment, or even attempted manslaughter depending on how the prosecutor wanted to handle it. We decided to pursue charges. Second, we called the rental company that managed the vacation house. We provided them with the full story and the hospital records. They were appalled and immediately launched an investigation into what happened on their property. Third, Neil called his principal and requested emergency personal days. He explained the situation, and his principal was completely supportive. "Take care of your family. We'll handle everything here." Fourth, I called my boss and explained what happened. My company has a very strict policy about family safety, and they immediately granted me family emergency leave. Then we began documenting everything. Every text message from family members, every phone call, every dismissive comment. We saved everything. The police investigation began that Tuesday. Detective Webb was assigned to our case, and she was incredibly thorough and professional. She explained that cases involving children require special protocols and that everything would be handled with Hannah's well-being as the top priority. Officers interviewed Hannah with a child psychologist present. I was allowed to sit with Hannah during the interview, which helped her feel more secure. The child psychologist, Dr. Cooper, was gentle but thorough in her questioning. "Hannah, can you tell me what happened at the pool?" Dr. Cooper asked. Hannah's voice was small but clear. "Tessa said she would help me swim. But then she pushed my head under the water and wouldn't let me come up. I tried to get up, but she kept pushing me down. I couldn't breathe, and it was really scary." "Did you ask Tessa to put your head under water?" "No. I didn't want to go under. I was scared, and I tried to tell her to stop, but I couldn't talk because my head was under the water." "What about the grown-ups? Did any of them try to help you?" Hannah thought for a moment. "Mommy tried to help me, but Aunt Yvonne laughed. Then Aunt Yvonne pushed my head down too, and everything went dark." The psychologist asked several more questions, and Hannah's account remained consistent throughout. She was clear that she hadn't consented to being pushed underwater, that she had tried to resist, and that the adults present had either encouraged it or failed to intervene. Detective Webb took detailed notes throughout the interview. Afterward, she spoke with Neil and me privately. "I want you to know that your daughter's account is very credible," she said. "Children Hannah's age rarely fabricate stories with this level of detail and consistency. What she's describing is a clear case of assault and child endangerment." Tessa was interviewed separately the following day, with Brent present and a different child psychologist conducting the interview. Initially, she claimed it was just playing, but when pressed by the child psychologist, she admitted that she held Hannah underwater to make her braver and that her mom said it was a good idea. "Did your mom tell you it was okay to push Hannah's head underwater?" the psychologist asked. "Yeah, she said Hannah was being a baby and needed to learn to be tough. She said pushing her underwater would help." "Did Hannah seem happy when you were pushing her head down?" Tessa hesitated. "No, she was trying to get away. But Mom said that was normal and I should keep doing it." "What happened after Hannah stopped moving?" "She went all floppy, and Aunt Lila got really mad. But Mom said Aunt Lila was being dramatic." That statement from Tessa was crucial. It established that Yvonne had not only failed to stop the incident but had actively encouraged it, even instructing Tessa to continue when Hannah was clearly in distress. Brent was devastated by his daughter's interview. He called us that evening, his voice shaking. "Lila, Neil, I had no idea Yvonne had told Tessa to do that. I was getting drinks from the kitchen when it happened. If I had known." He couldn't finish the sentence. Detective Webb also interviewed the other adults who were present. Their statements revealed a disturbing pattern of group negligence and poor judgment. My father's statement was particularly damaging. "We saw Hannah struggling a bit, but Yvonne said it was good for her. Yvonne has always been good with kids, so we trusted her judgment. When Hannah went limp, we thought she was just being dramatic." My mother's statement was similar. "Hannah has always been overly sensitive about water. Yvonne was trying to help her get over her fear. We didn't realize anything was seriously wrong until Lila started screaming." Craig's statement showed his own poor judgment. "It looked like normal roughhousing between cousins. Kids play rough sometimes. We didn't think it was dangerous." Gail admitted she had been distracted by her phone and hadn't really been paying attention to what was happening in the pool. The most damning statement came from Brent, who had returned from the kitchen just as Hannah lost consciousness. "When I came back outside, I saw Hannah floating face down in the pool. Yvonne was standing over her, laughing and saying something about how Hannah needed to toughen up. I immediately knew something was very wrong, but everyone else was acting like it was normal. Based on these interviews and statements, Detective Webb built a comprehensive case. She explained to us that the evidence showed a clear pattern of endangerment and negligence. What makes this case particularly serious, she explained, is that multiple adults were present and failed to intervene when a child was clearly in distress. Yvonne's actions were directly harmful, but the others' failure to act also contributed to Hannah's injuries. The detective also uncovered some disturbing background information about Yvonne's parenting methods. She interviewed Tessa's teachers, who reported that Tessa had previously described her mother's tough love approaches, including forcing Tessa to do things that scared her as a way to build character. One of Tessa's teachers, Mrs. Patterson, provided a written statement. Tessa has mentioned several times that her mother makes her do scary things to make her braver. Last month, she told me her mother made her touch a snake at the zoo even though she was terrified. Tessa seemed to think this was normal, but it concerned me. This pattern of behavior suggested that the pool incident wasn't an isolated event but part of Yvonne's overall philosophy about child-rearing. She genuinely believed that forcing children into frightening situations was helpful, regardless of the child's consent or comfort level. Detective Webb also discovered that there had been a previous incident at Tessa's school where Tessa had pushed a younger child off playground equipment, claiming she was helping him be braver. The school had required a parent conference, but Yvonne had dismissed the incident as kids being kids. The investigation also revealed text messages between Yvonne and Brent from several months earlier, where Yvonne had complained that Hannah was too coddled and needed toughening up. In one message, she wrote, "Lila babies Hannah too much. That kid needs some real challenges or she'll never learn to cope with life." These messages established a clear pattern of Yvonne viewing Hannah as needing correction and showed premeditation in her actions at the pool. Meanwhile, Hannah was struggling with the aftermath of the trauma. The nightmares started the first night we were back home. She would wake up crying, saying she couldn't breathe and that someone was holding her down. Neil and I took turns staying with her, reassuring her that she was safe. Hannah's pediatrician referred us to Dr. Sarah Patel, a child trauma specialist. Dr. Patel explained that what Hannah had experienced was a form of betrayal trauma, being hurt by someone she trusted in what should have been a safe environment. Hannah trusted Tessa to help her, Dr. Patel explained during our first family session. When Tessa hurt her instead, it violated that trust in a profound way. Add to that the fact that the other adults present didn't protect her, and you have a very serious trauma response. Hannah began having panic attacks whenever she saw water. Even running bath water would send her into a state of terror. We had to switch to quick showers with the bathroom door open so she could see that we were nearby. The most heartbreaking part was watching Hannah's personality change. She had always been a cautious but curious child, eager to try new things with proper support. After the pool incident, she became withdrawn and fearful of everything. She didn't want to go to parks, didn't want to play with other children, and clung to Neil and me constantly. Dr. Patel worked with Hannah using play therapy and EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, techniques adapted for children. Hannah gradually began to process what had happened to her and understand that it wasn't her fault. One breakthrough came about 6 weeks after the incident. Hannah was playing with dolls in Dr. Patel's office when she suddenly looked up and said, "The grown-ups should have helped the little girl in the pool. They were supposed to keep her safe, but they didn't." "That's right, Hannah," Dr. Patel said gently. "The grown-ups didn't do their job of keeping you safe." "How does that make you feel?" "Mad," Hannah said firmly. "And sad. I trusted them, but they laughed when I was scared." This was the first time Hannah had expressed anger about what happened to her, which Dr. Patel explained was a healthy and necessary part of her healing process. As Hannah worked through her trauma, Neil and I dealt with the ongoing family fallout. The text messages and phone calls from family members became increasingly hostile as news of the police investigation spread. Yvonne's messages became particularly vicious. She sent me long texts calling me a vindictive sister and accusing me of destroying the family over nothing. She claimed Hannah was fine and that I was teaching her to be a victim instead of a survivor. One message that particularly enraged me read, "Hannah is weak because you made her weak. I was trying to fix what you broke. Now you're ruining my life because you can't handle real parenting." My mother's attempts at peacemaking were almost as infuriating as Yvonne's attacks. She kept calling and texting, asking me to think about the family and suggesting we could work this out privately. "Lila, honey, families have problems, but we stick together," she said during one phone call. "Can't you just let this go? Yvonne feels terrible." "Mom," Hannah lost consciousness because Yvonne held her underwater. "This isn't a family squabble. This is child endangerment." "But pressing charges against your own sister? What will people think?" "I care more about what happened to my daughter than what people think, Mom." These conversations made it clear that my family still didn't understand the severity of what had occurred. They were more concerned about the family's reputation and Yvonne's consequences than they were about Hannah's well-being. The breaking point came when my father called and suggested that Hannah should apologize to Tessa for causing all this trouble. Apologize? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad, Hannah is the victim here. She nearly died. But look at all the problems this has caused. Yvonne might go to jail, Brent is talking about divorce, the whole family is falling apart. Maybe if Hannah just said she was sorry for overreacting. I hung up on him and blocked his number. Neil found me crying in our kitchen 20 minutes later. They want Hannah to apologize, I told him through my tears. They want our traumatized 6-year-old daughter to apologize for overreacting to nearly drowning. Neil's face went dark with anger. They're never going to be alone with Hannah again. Ever. That conversation with my father crystallized something for both Neil and me. Our family's reaction to Hannah's trauma was almost as damaging as the original incident. They were prioritizing Yvonne's comfort over Hannah's safety, and asking Hannah to minimize her own trauma to make the adults more comfortable. Dr. Patel helped us understand that this kind of family dynamic is common in abuse situations. Often, families pressure victims to forgive and forget because dealing with the reality of what happened is too uncomfortable for them, she explained. But asking Hannah to minimize her trauma or take responsibility for the family's reaction would be re-traumatizing her. We made the decision to limit contact with extended family members who couldn't acknowledge Hannah's trauma or support her healing process. This was painful, but it was necessary to protect Hannah's recovery. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings continued to move forward. The prosecutor assigned to our case, District Attorney Ruth Gilbert, was experienced in child endangerment cases and took Hannah's situation very seriously. What happened to your daughter meets the legal definition of assault and child endangerment, D.A. Thompson explained during our meeting. Yvonne's actions were deliberate, dangerous, and resulted in serious harm to Hannah. We intend to prosecute this case to the full extent of the law. The criminal charges against Yvonne included child endangerment in the first degree, assault in the third degree, and reckless endangerment. Each charge carried potential jail time and significant fines. Yvonne's lawyer initially tried to negotiate a plea deal that would involve only probation and community service, but D.A. Thompson refused. This case is too serious for a slap on the wrist, she told us. Hannah could have died, and Yvonne showed no remorse afterward. The community needs to see that this behavior has real consequences. The police also interviewed the other adults who were present. Their statements were damning. Several admitted they saw Hannah struggling but thought it was character building, others said they were following Yvonne's lead since she knew about kids. Based on the evidence and statements, charges were filed within 2 weeks. Yvonne was charged with child endangerment and assault. Tessa, being only 10, wasn't criminally charged, but CPS opened an investigation into the family's home environment and required that Tessa undergo counseling. CPS also conducted a thorough investigation of Yvonne's parenting practices. They interviewed Tessa's teachers, reviewed school records, and conducted home visits. Their investigation revealed a pattern of tough love parenting that bordered on abuse, leading to a formal parenting plan that required Yvonne to complete parenting classes and undergo regular supervision visits. The rental company banned our entire family from their properties and reported the incident to their insurance company. The insurance investigation led to a lawsuit against Yvonne and Brent for the damages and liability. But we weren't done. Neil and I filed a civil lawsuit against Yvonne and Brent for Hannah's medical expenses, our lost wages, pain and suffering, and punitive damages. We also requested that Yvonne's parental rights be evaluated, given her demonstrated inability to recognize child endangerment situations. The family reactions were swift and predictable. My parents called us vindictive and accused us of destroying the family over an accident. Craig said we were making mountains out of molehills. Gail said we were traumatizing Tessa unnecessarily. But here's what they didn't understand: Hannah was having nightmares every single night. She was afraid of bathtubs, refused to go near swimming pools, and had developed a stutter from the trauma. Our daughter was genuinely hurt by what happened, and they wanted us to pretend it was no big deal. The worst part was the text messages we received. Yvonne sent me dozens of messages calling me a helicopter parent and saying Hannah needed to learn life lessons. She accused me of babying Hannah and said the whole incident was my fault for not teaching Hannah to be tougher. Brent sent Neil a message saying, "Your kid is soft. Maybe this will make her stronger." My mother sent me a long email about how families stick together and how I was choosing strangers over family by involving the police and lawyers. Every single one of these messages was saved and turned over to our lawyer. As the criminal case progressed, more disturbing details emerged about Yvonne's behavior and attitude. The prosecution worked with a vacation rental company to obtain statements from their staff, as they had been present for the check-in and had interacted with our family. While there were no cameras in the pool area due to privacy regulations, several staff members had witnessed Yvonne's aggressive interactions with children during our stay. The pool maintenance worker, Carlos Ruiz, provided a statement that he had seen Yvonne roughly handling a child near the pool the day before the incident, forcing the child to jump from the diving board despite obvious fear. He had considered intervening but wasn't sure if it was his place as an employee. The defense tried to argue that the incident was a misunderstanding, that Yvonne was actually trying to help Hannah learn to swim. But expert witnesses quickly debunked that claim. Dr. Michael Roberts, a pediatric water safety expert, provided testimony about proper swimming instruction. Safe swimming instruction never involves holding a child underwater against their will. What happened to Hannah was not teaching, it was assault. The fact that she lost consciousness indicates severe oxygen deprivation that could have been fatal. The defense also tried to bring up Hannah's previous anxiety around water, suggesting that she was predisposed to panic. Dr. Patel, Hannah's trauma therapist, testified to shut down that argument. Hannah's previous caution around water was completely normal and age-appropriate, Dr. Patel explained. Many children need time to build confidence in water. What happened to Hannah was not a result of her personality, it was a result of being deliberately held underwater until she couldn't breathe. Yvonne's lawyer also attempted to portray the incident as a family disagreement that had been blown out of proportion. This strategy backfired spectacularly when the prosecutor played audio recordings from some of Yvonne's post-incident phone calls. In one recorded call to a friend, Yvonne said, "Lila is completely overreacting about this whole pool thing. Hannah barely went under for a minute, and now Lila's acting like I tried to murder her kid. Hannah needs to learn that the world isn't going to baby her like Lila does." In another call, Yvonne complained, "They took Hannah to the hospital for nothing. She was breathing fine. Kids fall down, they get back up. But Lila is raising Hannah to be weak, and now she's using this to punish me for trying to help." These recordings showed a complete lack of understanding about the seriousness of what had happened and no remorse for Hannah's trauma. The trial took place 14 months after the incident, allowing time for Hannah's trauma therapy to progress and for the CPS investigation to conclude. Hannah didn't have to testify in person, which we were grateful for. Instead, her recorded interviews with Dr. Cooper and the CPS caseworker were presented to the jury, along with her therapy records that documented her ongoing trauma response. "I did testify, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. The defense attorney tried to make me appear overprotective and dramatic, but the prosecutor helped me stay focused on the facts." "Mrs. Lila, can you describe what you saw when you reached your daughter in the pool?" the prosecutor asked. Hannah was completely limp in Tessa's hands. Her eyes had rolled back, and she wasn't moving or responding. "I thought she was dead," I answered, my voice shaking with the memory. "What was Yvonne's reaction when you pulled Hannah from the water?" "She laughed and said Hannah was being dramatic. When I said Hannah was unconscious, Yvonne said that was impossible and that Hannah was just being a baby." Neil's testimony was equally powerful. He described finding Hannah limp and unresponsive, his frantic drive to the hospital, and the 6 hours of not knowing if Hannah would have permanent brain damage. The most impactful testimony came from Dr. Murphy, the emergency room doctor who treated Hannah. She explained in clinical detail how close Hannah had come to death. "When a child loses consciousness from oxygen deprivation, we're looking at a life-threatening emergency," Dr. Murphy testified. Hannah's oxygen saturation levels when she arrived were dangerously low. Another minute or two underwater, and we would have been dealing with permanent brain damage or death. In your medical opinion, was this incident accidentally caused? Absolutely not. The duration and manner of submersion required to cause these symptoms cannot happen accidentally. Someone had to deliberately hold this child underwater for an extended period while she was actively struggling. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Yvonne's face went white when the verdict was read, and for the first time since the incident, she seemed to understand the gravity of what she had done. At sentencing, D.A. Thompson argued for significant consequences. The defendant showed a callous disregard for a child's life and safety. She endangered Hannah, failed to seek help when Hannah lost consciousness, and showed no remorse afterward. The defendant's actions could have resulted in Hannah's death. Yvonne was sentenced to 18 months in prison, with the requirement to serve at least 12 months before parole eligibility. She was also required to complete court-supervised parenting classes and undergo psychological evaluation before any potential unsupervised contact with children, including her own daughter. The civil trial took place 6 months after the criminal case concluded. It focused on the financial and emotional damages Hannah had suffered. Our lawyer presented evidence of Hannah's medical bills, ongoing therapy costs, our lost wages, and the continuing impact on Hannah's quality of life. Our attorney calculated the actual damages at $85,000, including medical bills, therapy costs, and lost wages. However, the jury also awarded punitive damages of $165,000, bringing the total to $250,000. The punitive damages were specifically intended to send a message that endangering children has serious financial consequences. Yvonne was required to pay the judgment through a combination of her savings, the sale of assets, and a payment plan supervised by the court. Her homeowner's insurance covered a portion of the negligent supervision claim, but the intentional assault was excluded from coverage. Throughout all of these legal proceedings, the most important work was happening in Hannah's therapy sessions. Dr. Patel was helping Hannah understand that what happened to her wasn't her fault and that she deserved to feel safe. The breakthrough in Hannah's healing came about 14 months after the incident. She was playing with toy figures in Dr. Patel's office when she created a scene with a little girl figure and several adult figures around a toy pool. "Tell me about your story, Hannah," Dr. Patel said. "This little girl was scared of the water, but that's okay because everyone gets scared sometimes," Hannah narrated as she played. "But this big girl and this grown-up were mean to her and made her go under the water when she didn't want to. What should have happened instead?" Hannah thought carefully, then rearranged the figures. "The grown-ups should have said, 'It's okay to be scared. We'll help you feel safe.' And they should have let her stay in the shallow water until she was ready." "That's right, Hannah. The grown-ups should have kept you safe. What happened to you was not okay, and it wasn't your fault." This play session brought a turning point in Hannah's recovery. She was beginning to understand that she deserved protection and that the adults around her had failed in their responsibility to keep her safe. Dr. Patel explained to Neil and me that Hannah was developing a healthy understanding of appropriate adult behavior. Hannah is learning to trust her own instincts about safety and to expect adults to respect her boundaries. This will actually make her safer in the long run because she'll be more likely to speak up if someone makes her uncomfortable. The family dynamics continue to evolve as well. Some family members began to understand the seriousness of what had happened, while others remained defensive and dismissive. The evidence was overwhelming. Hospital records, witness statements, Hannah's clear account of events, and Yvonne's own text messages where she admitted she thought Hannah needed toughening up. Yvonne's lawyer tried to argue that it was a misunderstanding and that Yvonne was just trying to help Hannah overcome her fear of water. The prosecutor's response was devastating. The defendant held a 6-year-old child underwater until she lost consciousness, then laughed about it. There is no misunderstanding here. In the civil case, our lawyer was methodical and thorough. We had documented every expense related to the incident, hospital bills, Hannah's therapy sessions, our lost wages, the cost of the hotel, everything. But more importantly, we had evidence of the ongoing impact on Hannah's life. Hannah's pediatric psychologist testified about Hannah's trauma response, her nightmares, her regression in swimming skills, and her general anxiety around water. The psychologist explained that Hannah would likely need ongoing therapy to overcome what happened to her. Our expert witness, a child safety specialist, testified about how dangerous Yvonne's actions were and how easily Hannah could have died. He explained that holding a child underwater until they lose consciousness is just short of attempted murder. The jury was not sympathetic to Yvonne's claims that she was just trying to help. They found her liable for assault, child endangerment, and infliction of emotional distress. They awarded us significant damages for Hannah's medical care, therapy, our expenses, and punitive damages. But the legal victories were just part of the story. The real changes came within our extended family. My parents initially tried to minimize what happened, but when they saw the hospital records and understood that Hannah could have died, their tune changed. They realized that their dismissive attitude had enabled Yvonne's dangerous behavior. My father called me 6 months after the incident. "Lila, I need to apologize. I didn't understand how serious it was. When I think about Hannah not being here." He couldn't finish the sentence. My mother was harder to reach, but eventually, she came around too. She started sending Hannah cards and presents, trying to rebuild their relationship. She never fully apologized for her initial reaction, but she did acknowledge that she'd been wrong. Craig and Gail took longer to come around. They were worried about their own kids being around Yvonne and Tessa after everything came out. They eventually cut ties with Yvonne as well, focusing on protecting Finn and Reed. The extended family dynamic was permanently changed. Yvonne became isolated, as people realized that her judgment about child safety couldn't be trusted. Family gatherings became smaller, more careful affairs. Brent divorced Yvonne 8 months after the incident. He told Neil that he couldn't stay married to someone who would endanger a child and then refused to take responsibility for it. He got full custody of Tessa and moved across the country for a fresh start. Yvonne lost her job when the local news picked up the story. She was working as a preschool aide, and the school district couldn't keep someone convicted of child endangerment on staff. She had to move back in with her parents and work minimum wage jobs. But the most important changes were in Hannah's healing process. It took time, patience, and a lot of therapy, but Hannah slowly began to overcome her trauma. We found a wonderful child psychologist who specialized in water-related trauma, and Hannah worked with her twice a week. We also found a trauma-informed swimming instructor who worked specifically with children who'd had frightening water experiences. Very slowly, over the course of a year, Hannah began to feel safe in water again. The breakthrough came almost exactly 1 year after the incident. Hannah asked if she could try swimming lessons again. Neil and I were nervous, but Hannah seemed genuinely ready. We found a facility that specialized in trauma recovery, and Hannah began working with an instructor named Miss Kelly. Miss Kelly was amazing. She let Hannah control the pace completely, never pushed her, and always made sure Hannah felt safe and supported. Hannah spent weeks just sitting by the pool, then putting her feet in, then standing in the shallow end. The first time Hannah voluntarily put her face in the water, Neil and I both cried. She was reclaiming her relationship with swimming on her own terms, but it was a slow process that took nearly 2 years of consistent work. Today, 3 years later, Hannah is 9 years old and has made significant progress in her recovery. She's not yet a confident swimmer, but she's no longer afraid of water. She can enjoy baths, play in shallow pools, and is working toward more advanced swimming skills with her trauma-informed instructor. Hannah also learned some important lessons about family. She understands that some people who claim to love you might not act in loving ways, and that it's okay to stay away from people who don't keep you safe. She knows that speaking up about dangerous situations is always the right thing to do. As for Yvonne, she completed court-ordered parenting classes and anger management. She was required to write a letter of apology to Hannah, acknowledging that her actions were dangerous and wrong. She's allowed supervised visits with Tessa twice a month, but Brent has made it clear that she'll never have unsupervised access to his daughter again. Tessa underwent extensive counseling as well. It turned out she'd been acting out some of her own trauma from Yvonne's harsh parenting methods. With proper therapy and her father's gentler approach, Tessa became a much kinder, more empathetic child. She wrote Hannah a letter too, apologizing for hurting her and promising to never hurt another child. The financial settlement we received paid for Hannah's therapy, covered all our expenses, and set up a college fund for Hannah. But more importantly, it sent a message that Hannah's safety and well-being mattered, that what happened to her was serious, and that there would be consequences for anyone who endangered her. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if we did the right thing by pursuing legal action against family. But then I look at Hannah, healthy, happy, confident Hannah, and I know we made the right choice. We showed her that her safety matters more than family politics, that adults should protect children, and that dangerous behavior has consequences. We also potentially saved other children. Yvonne can no longer work with children. She's required to disclose her conviction in certain situations, and she's learned that endangering children isn't acceptable behavior. The family vacation that was supposed to be about making happy memories became the worst experience of our lives. But it also became the moment when Neil and I proved to ourselves and to Hannah that we would move mountains to protect her. It became the moment when we showed Hannah that her voice matters, her safety matters, and she never has to accept dangerous behavior from anyone, even family. These days, our family vacations look very different. They're smaller, more careful, and always focused on making sure everyone feels safe and respected. Hannah helps plan them now, and she has veto power over any activity that makes her uncomfortable. She's learned that her feelings and her safety are important, and that lesson will serve her well for the rest of her life. The pool incident changed everything, but in the end, it made our little family stronger. Hannah learned she could survive scary things. Neil and I learned we would fight anyone to protect our daughter. And we all learned that sometimes doing the right thing means making hard choices, even when it's family. Hannah still has that pink and purple unicorn swimsuit. She wore it to her swim lesson last week and told Miss Kelly, "This is my brave suit. I almost lost it once, but I got it back." That pretty much sums up Hannah's recovery journey. She almost lost her bravery, but she got it back, stronger than ever.